Racist fan throws beer at black athlete, then learns he's their team's new captain. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The roar of the stadium echoed across the city as thousands of fans cheered for their team. It was game day, and the excitement was palpable. But amidst the electrifying energy of the crowd, a sense of tension simmered beneath the surface. Marcus Johnson, a star athlete with a reputation for his resilience and skill, had recently been traded to this new team. Known for breaking barriers and overcoming adversity, Marcus was no stranger to challenges. However, today, he faced something more insidious than just the pressures of performing well: racial prejudice. As Marcus warmed up on the field, running sprints and practicing passes, some fans in the stands whispered among themselves. A man in the front row, wearing the team's old captain's jersey, scowled at Marcus. This was Pete Hargrove, a self-proclaimed superfan who had followed the team for decades. But Pete wasn't just a fan. He was also known for his temper and controversial opinions, often spewing racist remarks disguised as jokes. "Who let this guy onto our team?" Pete muttered, loud enough for those around him to hear. "We don't need him. He's not what this team stands for." The people nearby shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked away, unwilling to confront Pete's comments. Marcus, however, remained focused. He had heard worse before and knew better than to let the hate distract him. The game began with a high-energy start. Marcus quickly proved his worth, making strategic plays and energizing his teammates. But every time he succeeded, Pete grew angrier. "Lucky shot," Pete yelled after Marcus scored a critical point. "Doesn't mean he's captain material." His voice carried through the section, drawing uncomfortable glances from other fans. By halftime, the team was ahead, largely thanks to Marcus's contributions. As he walked toward the locker room, sweat dripping down his face, Pete couldn't hold back any longer. Clutching his half-empty beer cup, he leaned over the railing and shouted, "Hey, you think you're some kind of hero? You don't belong here." Marcus paused briefly, his jaw tightening, but he didn't respond. He continued walking, keeping his head high. Pete, however, wasn't done. In a fit of rage, he hurled his beer toward Marcus, splashing the athlete's back. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and a wave of silence fell over the section. Marcus stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, his gaze locking with Pete's. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Pete smirked, seemingly proud of his actions, but his confidence wavered as Marcus began walking toward him. "Security," someone shouted, and within moments, 2 guards approached Pete. "What's the problem here?" one of the guards asked. "No problem," Pete said defensively. "Just teaching this guy a lesson." The guard raised an eyebrow. "You mean throwing beer at him? That's not a lesson. That's assault." The crowd murmured in agreement, with some fans finally speaking up. "Yeah, that was uncalled for," a woman said. "You should be ashamed." Pete's face turned red as he realized he was losing the support of the crowd. He tried to argue, but the security guards weren't interested in his excuses. They escorted him out of the stadium as the fans cheered for Marcus, showing their support for the athlete. Marcus didn't say a word. He simply nodded at the crowd, his calm demeanor speaking volumes. But inside, he couldn't help but wonder why people like Pete still existed. How could someone be so hateful without even knowing him? Back in the locker room, Marcus took a deep breath and refocused. He had a game to win, and he wasn't going to let Pete's actions derail him. The coach, noticing Marcus's composure, clapped him on the back. "Good job out there, Marcus," the coach said. "Don't let people like that get to you." "I won't," Marcus replied. "Let's finish what we started." The second half of the game was even more intense than the first. Marcus played with determination, blocking out the earlier incident. His teammates rallied around him, feeding off his energy. Together, they dominated the field, securing a decisive victory. As the final whistle blew, the crowd erupted in cheers. Marcus was named player of the game, and his teammates lifted him onto their shoulders, celebrating their new star. But the story didn't end there. Little did Pete know, his actions would soon come back to haunt him. Marcus had a secret, one that would shock the entire team, and Pete most of all. The stadium was still buzzing with excitement as fans poured out into the streets, recounting the team's thrilling victory. But in the back of Pete Hargrove's mind, his bruised ego simmered. He was furious, not just because the team won without his approval, but because Marcus Johnson, the athlete he had openly disrespected, had been the star of the game. Pete replayed the events in his head as he trudged to his car. He could still hear the murmurs of disapproval from the fans around him and see the judgmental stares. For years, Pete had considered himself a die-hard supporter, someone whose loyalty earned him respect among the fan base. Yet tonight, he felt like an outcast. And it was all because of that guy, as he bitterly referred to Marcus. As Pete drove home, he grumbled to himself. How's he gonna come in here, take over, and act like he owns the place? This team doesn't need him, he muttered. But deep down, he felt a pang of guilt. He had been kicked out of the stadium, a place he considered a second home, and now he was beginning to wonder if his behavior had gone too far. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in the team locker room, surrounded by his teammates. The energy was electric, and congratulations flowed freely as players high-fived each other and recapped the game's highlights. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Marcus remained quiet, lost in thought. "Marcus, man, you killed it out there," one of his teammates, Devin, exclaimed. "You've got ice in your veins. That guy throwing beer at you didn't even faze you." Marcus offered a small smile. "I've dealt with worse," he replied. "I just focus on the game." Devin nodded, respecting Marcus's restraint. But another teammate chimed in, clearly more agitated. "You shouldn't have to deal with that kind of garbage, man. That guy's a disgrace. Someone like him doesn't deserve to call himself a fan." Marcus shrugged. "People like him are everywhere. I can't control what they do. All I can do is prove them wrong." The room fell silent for a moment, a sense of admiration sweeping through the team. Marcus's humility and strength were inspiring, and his presence was beginning to galvanize the group in a way they hadn't experienced in years. The coach entered the locker room, his booming voice cutting through the chatter. "All right, listen up, everyone," he announced. "I've got some news." The players turned their attention to the coach, curious. The coach continued, "Tonight was a huge win for us, and I couldn't be prouder of how you all came together. But there's one more thing we need to address." He looked directly at Marcus, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Marcus, come up here." Marcus stood, slightly puzzled but obedient, as he joined the coach at the front of the room. "Marcus, you've been with us for a short time, but your impact has been undeniable," the coach said. "You've shown leadership, resilience, and a drive that's infectious. And that's why I'm proud to announce that, effective immediately, you're our new team captain." The locker room erupted in cheers, players clapping and shouting their approval. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the announcement sinking in. He had worked tirelessly to reach this point, but hearing it spoken aloud felt surreal. "Thank you, Coach," Marcus said finally, his voice steady despite the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. "It's an honor, and I promise to give this team everything I've got." The celebration continued late into the night, but Marcus couldn't help but think about the earlier incident with Pete. He knew the title of captain wouldn't shield him from prejudice, and he resolved to use his position to not only lead the team but also to challenge the biases that persisted in the world around him. The next morning, news of Marcus's promotion spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with posts praising the team's decision, and local news outlets highlighted his journey. However, not everyone was thrilled. Pete, still nursing his wounded pride, stumbled across the headline while scrolling through his phone. Marcus Johnson named new team captain after stunning performance. Pete's jaw tightened as he read the article. "Captain?" he muttered incredulously. "How can they make him captain? He's barely been here." Unable to contain his frustration, Pete took to social media, where he vented his grievances in a series of posts. "This is a slap in the face to the team's legacy," he wrote. "How can they replace our real captain with someone like him?" The backlash was swift. Fans flooded Pete's comments, calling him out for his behavior at the game and accusing him of being out of touch. Marcus earned that title, one commenter replied. "You're just mad because he proved you wrong. Maybe focus on being a better fan instead of tearing people down," another wrote. Pete tried to argue, but the overwhelming tide of criticism left him feeling defeated. He closed the app, throwing his phone onto the couch in frustration. But the sting of the comments lingered. For the first time, Pete began to question whether his actions were justified, or if he was simply clinging to outdated ideas. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to settle into his role as captain. He led by example, pushing himself and his teammates to new heights. Under his leadership, the team began to gel in ways they hadn't before, and their performance on the field reflected it. They racked up wins, climbing the league rankings and earning a reputation as a force to be reckoned with. As the weeks passed, Marcus became more than just a captain. He became a symbol of resilience and unity. Fans who had once been skeptical now rallied behind him, recognizing the heart and determination he brought to the game. But not everyone was convinced. Pete, still harboring resentment, decided to attend another game. This time, he was determined to keep his cool. But as he watched Marcus lead the team with precision and poise, something began to shift within him. For the first time, Pete saw Marcus not as an outsider, but as a player who truly embodied the spirit of the team. And though he wasn't ready to admit it, Pete felt a flicker of respect for the man he had once dismissed. Pete sat in the stands, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, watching the game unfold. It was hard for him to deny the impact Marcus had on the team. The crowd roared every time Marcus made a play, and the energy in the stadium was electric. Even Pete, in his stubbornness, couldn't ignore the undeniable truth. Marcus was a phenomenal athlete, and under his leadership, the team was thriving. Still, old habits died hard. Pete found himself nitpicking Marcus's every move, searching for mistakes he could latch onto. But as the minutes ticked by, Marcus continued to shine. He was everywhere on the field, blocking, tackling, strategizing. His passion and determination were palpable, and it was clear that his teammates respected and trusted him implicitly. As the game drew to a close, Marcus sealed the victory with a stunning play, intercepting the ball and scoring a game-winning touchdown. The stadium erupted into cheers, and Pete, despite himself, felt a surge of excitement. For a brief moment, he forgot his grudges and joined in the celebration, clapping and shouting along with the rest of the crowd. But as the post-game festivities began, Pete's bitterness crept back in. He watched from the sidelines as Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice steady and confident. "This victory isn't just about me," Marcus said, holding the game ball in one hand. "It's about all of us. Every player, every fan, everyone who believes in this team. Together, we're unstoppable." The crowd roared their approval, and Marcus continued, "I know not everyone here was happy when I joined this team. I know I had to prove myself to some of you. But I hope tonight shows that I'm here for one reason only, to give this team everything I've got." Pete shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus's words struck a chord, and for the first time, Pete felt a pang of shame. He had been so quick to judge, so unwilling to give Marcus a chance, and now he was being confronted with the reality of his own prejudice. As the crowd dispersed, Pete found himself lingering near the exit, watching as fans lined up to meet Marcus and get autographs. He overheard snippets of conversations, fans praising Marcus's performance, parents telling their kids to look up to him as a role model. Pete felt a twinge of jealousy. For years, he had been one of the most vocal and passionate supporters of the team, but now he felt like an outsider. Back in the locker room, Marcus was surrounded by teammates and reporters. The atmosphere was jubilant, but Marcus remained humble, deflecting praise and emphasizing the team's collective effort. As he answered questions, he caught a glimpse of Pete through the doorway. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Marcus recognized the man who had thrown beer at him during his first game. Marcus paused, his expression unreadable. He considered confronting Pete but decided against it. He knew that actions spoke louder than words, and his performance on the field had already proven his worth. Pete, however, felt the weight of Marcus's gaze. He looked away quickly, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. He couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus had seen right through him, that he knew exactly what kind of person Pete had been. Over the next few days, Pete's thoughts were consumed by the events at the game. He replayed Marcus's speech in his mind, the words echoing in his head. He began to realize that his anger and resentment weren't really about Marcus. They were about himself. Pete had clung to an outdated sense of identity, one that excluded anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of what a fan or a player should be. Driven by a desire to make amends, Pete decided to take a step he had never considered before. He attended a community outreach event hosted by the team, where Marcus was scheduled to speak. The event was held at a local youth center, and the room was packed with kids and families eager to meet their heroes. When Marcus took the stage, the room fell silent. He spoke about his journey, the challenges he had faced, and the importance of perseverance. "It's not about where you start," Marcus said. "It's about where you're going and the choices you make along the way." Pete listened intently, feeling a mixture of admiration and regret. He realized that Marcus's story was one of resilience and hope, a story that deserved to be celebrated, not dismissed. After the event, Pete hesitated before approaching Marcus. When he finally worked up the courage, he extended a hand and said, "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked at Pete, surprised but not unkind. "For what?" he asked, though he clearly knew the answer. "For everything," Pete said, struggling to find the right words. "I was wrong about you. I judged you without giving you a chance, and I acted like a fool. I'm sorry." Marcus studied Pete for a moment before shaking his hand. "I appreciate that," he said simply. "It takes guts to admit when you're wrong." Pete nodded, feeling a sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had been building inside him began to ease. He realized that letting go of his anger and prejudice was the only way to truly enjoy the sport he loved. As Pete walked away, he felt a glimmer of hope. He knew he still had work to do, but he was ready to start. And as he watched Marcus interact with the kids, signing autographs and posing for photos, Pete couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for the man who had proven him wrong. As the weeks passed, Pete began to attend more games and community events, each time watching Marcus from a different perspective. No longer blinded by prejudice, he started to appreciate Marcus's skill, leadership, and charisma. It was undeniable that Marcus had revitalized the team and brought a sense of unity that had been missing for years. At one particular game, Pete noticed something that deeply moved him. During halftime, Marcus invited a group of underprivileged kids onto the field for a quick football clinic. The kids, who were visibly nervous at first, quickly warmed up to Marcus's friendly demeanor. He crouched down to their level, demonstrating simple drills and encouraging them with words of praise. "You see that, Pete?" asked one of Pete's longtime friends, Sam, who had been sitting next to him. "That man's not just a player, he's a role model. He's out here inspiring the next generation." Pete nodded, his chest tightening. He couldn't deny it anymore. Marcus wasn't just a great athlete, he was a great person. For years, Pete had believed that supporting the team meant protecting its traditions and legacy, but Marcus was showing him that growth and change were essential for the team's future. One evening, after a particularly thrilling victory, Pete decided to write a letter to Marcus. He wasn't much of a writer, but he felt compelled to put his thoughts into words. He began the letter with an admission of guilt, explaining how he had judged Marcus unfairly and how he had been resistant to change. He then thanked Marcus for showing him the error of his ways and for being a positive force in the community. The next day, Pete mustered the courage to deliver the letter to the team's headquarters. He handed it to the receptionist, who promised to pass it along to Marcus. Pete left feeling a mixture of anxiety and relief. He didn't expect a response, but he hoped that Marcus would at least know how much he had come to respect him. A few days later, Pete received a surprise invitation in the mail. It was from the team, inviting him to a special meet and greet event with the players. Attached to the invitation was a handwritten note from Marcus. "Pete, I got your letter. Thank you for reaching out. I'd love to meet you in person. Come join us at the event." Pete was stunned. He had never expected Marcus to acknowledge his letter, let alone invite him to a private event. When the day of the meet and greet arrived, Pete dressed in his best team jersey and made his way to the stadium. As he entered the event space, he was greeted by the sight of fans mingling with players, the atmosphere filled with laughter and excitement. Marcus spotted Pete from across the room and made his way over. "Pete, right?" Marcus said, extending a hand. "It's great to finally meet you." Pete shook Marcus's hand, feeling a mix of nervousness and gratitude. I just want to say thank you," Pete stammered. "Not just for inviting me, but for everything you've done, for the team, for the community, and for showing me what it means to be a true leader." Marcus smiled warmly. "That means a lot, Pete. I believe in bringing people together, no matter where they come from or what they believe. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." As they talked, Pete found himself opening up about his own journey, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned, and his newfound commitment to being a better person. Marcus listened intently, nodding in understanding. By the end of the evening, Pete felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. Meeting Marcus in person had solidified the respect he had developed for him, and he left the event feeling lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. In the following weeks, Pete became one of Marcus's most vocal supporters. He attended every game, cheered louder than anyone else, and even volunteered at the team's community events. He made it his mission to spread a message of inclusion and positivity, sharing his own story as a cautionary tale of the dangers of prejudice. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Fans who had once sided with Pete in his resistance to Marcus now admired his change of heart. He became a symbol of redemption, proof that it was never too late to change and do better. One day, during a televised game, the camera panned to Pete in the stands. The commentator remarked on Pete's journey, highlighting how Marcus had not only won over the team, but had also changed the hearts of even the most skeptical fans. Pete waved sheepishly at the camera, his face turning red as the crowd around him cheered. In the locker room, Marcus watched the broadcast and smiled. He knew that his impact extended far beyond the field, and moments like these reminded him why he played the game. It wasn't just about winning, it was about making a difference. The team went on to have one of the most successful seasons in its history, with Marcus leading them to the championship. During the post-game celebration, Marcus was asked what the victory meant to him. "This isn't just a win for the team," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's a win for everyone who believes in the power of unity and resilience. No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, you can achieve great things when you work together." Pete stood in the crowd, tears streaming down his face as he watched Marcus hoist the championship trophy. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just for the team, but for the man who had taught him the true meaning of sportsmanship and humanity. As the championship celebrations continued, Marcus took time to walk around the stadium, shaking hands with fans, taking pictures, and thanking them for their support. When he reached Pete, he stopped and pulled him into a firm handshake, followed by a heartfelt hug. "You were a big part of this, Pete," Marcus said with a genuine smile. "Your story inspired so many people to look beyond their differences and come together." Pete shook his head, humility evident in his expression. "No, Marcus, you did this. You showed all of us what leadership really means. You made us better on and off the field." The bond between Marcus and Pete became a talking point in the media. Reporters dug into Pete's past comments about Marcus and contrasted them with his new role as a vocal supporter of unity and inclusion. Pete agreed to share his journey in interviews, openly admitting his mistakes and emphasizing the importance of self-reflection and growth. "It's not easy to confront your own biases," Pete told one reporter during a live interview. "But Marcus showed me that change is possible, not just for individuals but for entire communities. I'll always be grateful to him for that." The story resonated with viewers, sparking conversations across the country about prejudice, redemption, and the power of sports to bring people together. Social media lit up with posts praising Marcus and Pete, with hashtags like #UnityThroughSports and #SecondChances trending nationwide. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to build his legacy, not just as an athlete but as a philanthropist. He announced plans to start a foundation focused on providing opportunities for underprivileged youth to get involved in sports. The foundation aimed to break down barriers and ensure that every child, regardless of their background, had a chance to thrive. Pete was one of the first people to volunteer for the foundation. He threw himself into the work, helping organize events, raise funds, and mentor young athletes. He saw it as a way to give back and to honor the lessons he had learned from Marcus. One of the foundation's first major events was a youth football camp held at the team stadium. Hundreds of kids showed up, eager to meet Marcus and learn from him. Pete was in charge of logistics, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. As he watched the kids running drills and laughing together, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. During the camp's closing ceremony, Marcus invited Pete to join him on stage. The crowd erupted into applause as Marcus introduced Pete as one of the foundation's key supporters. Pete's journey is proof that we all have the power to change, Marcus said, addressing the crowd. It's never too late to challenge our own beliefs and become better people. And when we do, we can make the world a better place for everyone. Pete stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. He looked out at the crowd, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not proud of the person I used to be," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But I'm proud of the person I'm becoming. And that's because of Marcus. He didn't just change my perspective, he changed my heart. And for that, I'll always be grateful." The crowd erupted into cheers, many wiping tears from their eyes. Marcus patted Pete on the back, a look of pride on his face. As the event came to an end, Marcus and Pete stood on the field, watching as the kids and their families slowly made their way out of the stadium. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the scene. "You know, Marcus," Pete said, breaking the silence, "I used to think I knew what loyalty to this team meant. But I didn't. Not really. You taught me that loyalty isn't about holding on to the past. It's about embracing the future." Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "And the future is brighter when we face it together." Their conversation was interrupted by a young boy who approached them, clutching a football in his hands. He looked up at Marcus with wide eyes, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Marcus, can you sign my ball?" he asked. Marcus knelt down, taking the ball and pen from the boy. "Of course, buddy. What's your name?" "Jacob," the boy replied, his face lighting up with a smile. As Marcus signed the ball, Pete crouched down next to Jacob. "You know, Jacob, you're lucky to have a role model like Marcus. He's not just a great player, he's a great person." Jacob nodded eagerly. "I want to be just like him when I grow up." Pete's heart swelled with emotion as he watched the boy run off to rejoin his parents, clutching the signed football tightly to his chest. He turned to Marcus, his voice filled with gratitude. "You're changing lives, Marcus. One person at a time." Marcus placed a hand on Pete's shoulder, his expression serious yet kind. "We all have the power to make a difference, Pete. And together we can do even more." As they left the stadium that evening, Pete felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent so many years clinging to outdated beliefs, but now he was determined to use his voice and his platform to promote positivity and inclusion. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still moments of self-doubt and regret. But with Marcus's guidance and the support of the community, Pete knew he was on the right path. He had learned that it was never too late to change, and that sometimes the people we least expect can become the greatest teachers. As the months passed, the impact of Marcus's leadership extended far beyond the football field. The foundation he had established was gaining momentum, attracting support from prominent athletes, celebrities, and community leaders. Pete, now a full-time volunteer, dedicated himself to the foundation's mission. He saw it as a way to give back and to honor the second chance Marcus had given him. One of the foundation's most ambitious projects was a mentorship program for at-risk youth. The program paired kids with mentors who could guide them, provide support, and help them navigate the challenges they faced. Pete became a mentor to a young boy named Malik, who reminded him of Marcus in many ways. Malik was shy and reserved, but he had a natural talent for football. Pete took him under his wing, attending his games, offering advice, and encouraging him to believe in himself. Over time, Malik's confidence grew, and he began to shine on the field and in the classroom. You've got a bright future ahead of you, Malik, Pete told him after one particularly impressive game. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Malik's face lit up with a smile. Thanks, Mr. Pete. That means a lot. Through his work with the foundation, Pete discovered a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. He was no longer defined by his past mistakes but by the positive impact he was making in the lives of others. It was a transformation he never thought possible, and he owed it all to Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to excel as the team's captain. Under his leadership, the team made it to the championship for the second year in a row. The pressure was intense, but Marcus remained focused and determined. He knew that the stakes were high, not just for the team but for the message they were sending to the world. On the day of the championship game, the stadium was packed with fans, all eager to see if Marcus and his team could secure another victory. Among the crowd were Malik and his family, along with hundreds of kids from the foundation. Pete had arranged for them to have front row seats, knowing how much it would mean to them to see their hero in action. As the game unfolded, it became clear that Marcus was a force to be reckoned with. He led the team with skill, precision, and unwavering determination. Every play, every pass, and every tackle was a testament to his dedication and hard work. In the final moments of the game, with the score tied and only seconds remaining on the clock, Marcus made a daring move. He sprinted down the field, dodging defenders and leaping into the air to catch a pass. The crowd held its breath as he landed in the end zone, securing the winning touchdown. The stadium erupted into cheers, the sound deafening as fans celebrated the team's victory. Marcus was swarmed by his teammates, who lifted him onto their shoulders, chanting his name. As the celebration continued, Marcus spotted Pete in the crowd. He motioned for him to come down to the field, and Pete hesitated for a moment before making his way through the throngs of fans. When he reached Marcus, the two embraced, their bond stronger than ever. "This isn't just my victory," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's ours." Pete nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." The championship win was more than just a triumph on the field. It was a symbol of the power of unity, perseverance, and redemption. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, greatness could be achieved when people came together. In the days following the championship victory, Marcus's name was on everyone's lips. Media outlets praised his performance and highlighted his leadership both on and off the field. The foundation received a surge of donations, with people from all over the country inspired by Marcus's story and the work being done to support at-risk youth. One of the most touching moments came during a press conference held by the team. Marcus, standing at the podium, addressed a room packed with journalists, fans, and supporters. Beside him were Pete, Malik, and several kids from the foundation. "This championship is not just about football," Marcus began, his voice steady and resolute. "It's about proving that no matter where you come from, no matter what challenges you face, you can rise above and achieve greatness. It's about giving others the chance to do the same." He gestured toward Malik, who looked both nervous and proud to be standing in front of so many people. "This is Malik. He's a future star not just in football but in life. And there are thousands more kids like him out there, waiting for someone to believe in them. That's what our foundation is about. Believing in people, lifting them up, and giving them the tools to succeed." The room erupted into applause, and Marcus took a step back, allowing Malik to step forward. Though shy, Malik mustered the courage to speak. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," Malik said, his voice trembling slightly. "You've shown me that I can do anything if I work hard and believe in myself. You're my hero." The words struck a chord with everyone in the room, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. For Marcus, it was a moment of validation, not just for his efforts on the field but for the impact he was making in the lives of others. Meanwhile, Pete's transformation was also drawing attention. Journalists were intrigued by his story. A man who had once been a symbol of everything wrong with fandom but had turned his life around to become a mentor and advocate for change. "I'm not proud of who I used to be," Pete admitted in an interview, "but I'm grateful for the chance to make amends. Marcus showed me that it's never too late to change, and now I want to be that example for others." As the foundation continued to grow, Marcus and Pete worked tirelessly to expand its reach. They organized events, partnered with schools and community organizations, and launched campaigns to raise awareness about the importance of mentorship and inclusion. One particularly memorable event was a charity football game featuring Marcus's team, other professional athletes, and kids from the foundation. The game was held in the same stadium where Marcus had once faced the racist fan. But this time, the atmosphere was one of unity and celebration. Pete, now a trusted member of the foundation's leadership team, played a crucial role in organizing the event. He even took to the field himself, much to the amusement of the kids, who cheered him on as he tried, and mostly failed, to keep up with the professional players. The highlight of the day came when Marcus and Malik teamed up for a play that ended with Malik scoring a touchdown. The crowd went wild, and Malik was hoisted onto the shoulders of the players, his smile radiating pure joy. "This is what it's all about," Marcus said to Pete as they watched the celebration unfold. "This is why we do what we do." Pete nodded, his heart full. "You've changed so many lives, Marcus, including mine." As the sun set on the stadium, Marcus and Pete stood side by side, reflecting on how far they had come. They knew there was still much work to be done, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For Marcus, the journey had always been about more than just football. It was about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and proving that love and unity could triumph over hate. And with Pete by his side and a growing army of supporters behind them, he was determined to continue making a difference. The foundation's motto, emblazoned on banners throughout the stadium, captured the spirit of their mission. "Together, we rise," and rise they did, lifting not just themselves but everyone around them. Months after the charity game, Marcus and Pete's efforts continued to ripple through their community and beyond. The foundation expanded its programs to include academic tutoring, mental health support, and even career counseling for young adults. Marcus's story had become a symbol of hope, and invitations poured in for him to speak at schools, conferences, and events worldwide. One particularly significant moment came when Marcus was invited to address a United Nations summit on racism and inclusivity in sports. Standing on a global stage, he shared his journey, from being an overlooked athlete to becoming a captain and changemaker, all while fighting against prejudice. He spoke about the transformative power of kindness, the importance of second chances, and the role that sports could play in bridging divides. "We often think of sports as just games," Marcus said, his voice resonating in the grand hall. "But there's so much more than that. Sports can unite people from different backgrounds, teach us resilience, and remind us that we're stronger together. It's up to us, athletes, fans, and leaders, to ensure that the spirit of the game reflects the best in us, not the worst." The audience gave Marcus a standing ovation, and his speech was shared across the globe, sparking conversations about equality and representation in sports. Pete, who had accompanied Marcus to the summit, watched with pride. He couldn't believe how far they had come, from a heated confrontation in the stands to standing together on one of the world's biggest stages. Back home, the foundation celebrated a milestone, its 1,000th mentorship pairing. Malik, who was now a confident and ambitious teenager, had taken on a mentorship role himself, helping younger kids navigate challenges and find their passion. "Mr. Marcus believed in me when no one else did," Malik often said. "Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else." The stadium, once a place where Marcus had faced hate, had transformed into a hub of positivity and change. Pete had worked with Marcus to organize a yearly unity game where players, fans, and community members came together to celebrate diversity and inclusion. The event featured not only football but also cultural performances, food festivals, and workshops on empathy and understanding. During the most recent Unity game, Pete took the stage to share his story. He spoke candidly about his past mistakes and how meeting Marcus had changed his perspective. "I used to think strength was about tearing others down," Pete admitted. "But Marcus taught me that true strength is about lifting others up." As Pete spoke, the crowd listened intently, many moved to tears by his sincerity. When he finished, Marcus joined him on stage, embracing him in a show of solidarity. "Pete's journey reminds us all that it's never too late to change," Marcus said, his arm around his friend. "Together, We've shown that love is stronger than hate. The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus and Pete stood shoulder to shoulder, a testament to the power of forgiveness and growth. As the Unity game concluded, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the moment when Pete had thrown the beer, the anger he had felt, and the decision to confront hate with grace and determination. That choice had set off a chain reaction, proving that even in the face of adversity, one person could make a difference. Marcus's story wasn't just about overcoming racism or achieving success in football. It was about creating a legacy of compassion, resilience, and hope. He had turned a moment of hatred into a lifetime of impact, inspiring countless others to believe in the possibility of change. As the stadium lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus stood at midfield, looking out at the sea of empty seats. Pete joined him, and the two men shared a moment of quiet reflection. "We've come a long way," Pete said, his voice filled with emotion. "And we're just getting started," Marcus replied, a smile spreading across his face. Together, they walked off the field, ready to continue their mission of building a better, more inclusive world. One step, one story, and one heart at a time.